I started to know that it was time to transition from modeling when I started to feel a huge sense of dissatisfaction with myself. People are just not confident in their abilities, and we live in a world where we over-exaggerate people's perception. You think that if you tried something and failed, people are sitting in their house laughing at you.
Yeah.
If you get a warm intro from someone to another person, if you don't do as much as you need to do to build your own direct connection with the person you were introduced to, you would only get surface level benefits. Sometimes people don't take the first step because of an over-consciousness.
Hi, it's Kennedy Ekezie. Welcome to Limitless. In this series, we spotlight the most incredible young people from across the world who are pushing boundaries and inspiring excellence. You're definitely in the right place if you're a young person who is looking to defy the boxes that have been placed on you by yourself and by other people. Here, we believe that your potential is truly limitless. Please like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed it to see more. Now, let's get into the video. Ifeoma, it's so good to talk to you today, especially in this context. It's the first of this interview series titled Limitless, and you're someone who really embodies the limitless character. So thanks for joining me today. Firstly, how are you feeling? How are you?
I'm fine. I feel very light. Today is Monday, and I'm very thankful that this is one of those Mondays that don't feel like a lot.
Is it because you're talking to me?
I'm on leave. I'm on leave. Officially my first one in like 3-4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long is he for?
1 week. That's like 5 days.
Well, it's like you waited so long for so little.
I mean, not really. I think it's more of like the quality of what I get to do in these 5 days than the
You're spending one of it traveling, I know that. And you're not really on leave. You're speaking at a conference,
but fair. But I think it's like very freeing to not like have like that responsibility. Because there's a difference between something being like obligation and you like choosing to do it. So right now I have the choice.
Yeah. Which is something we'll probably talk about today. But it's really good to talk to you today. You're someone who I consider a very dear friend and I love very much. And it's an unusual context for us to chat, but I'm excited. I think everyone is going to find this very valuable. So let's start with this, Ifeoma. What's the context that people need to know about you? What's the context behind the woman we know today that we see and admire in many ways? Your background, growing up, what went into that?
I think first of all, I really like how that question is phrased, because the translation is who is Ifeoma, like in the typical interviews, and then it makes it very hard to really tell who I am, because when we hear that question, the first thing we think of is what we do. Oh, I'm the co-founder and COO of Sendstack. So I like how that question is phrased because it is making me think very deeply. But okay, context, who am I? I would say the first thing that defines me is my faith, like before anything else, just the fact that I'm a Christian, and I have over the years, by God's grace, built an intimate relationship with him. And so that defines a lot of like my background.
I'm curious, why? Why is faith the cornerstone of your identity? Because it's really important.
Yeah. I'll tell you it's because that's where I found most of my purpose. Well, not most, all of that's where I found my entire purpose. So I think it was at the roundtable, the first version, and I use this illustration of how when a manufacturer creates a phone, it's not the consumer who determines how that device is used. It's the creator.
Purpose of the device.
It's the creator who tells you this is a phone, this is an iPad, this is a computer, and even though there will be interlapping functions, the most important thing a phone is used for example, is, like phone calls. So no matter how smart our phones get, if it's not able to connect like two people via like a phone call, then it's probably an iPod. Or
it's a dumb phone. It's not smart.
So I think for me, it's that same principle I apply. It's like, who made me and why am I here? What do I need to do? And not just in context of work, but just really we're created to go back and find out our purpose from the person who created us. And so for me, that just defines everything, even down to like very minute details, like how I dress.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's very important for me, because I'll be so lost, like if I was trying to do life, without figuring that part out.
I'm curious what that process was like for you, because for a lot of young people, it's the most significant crisis that we face as people in our 20s, early 30s is that of our identity. Where do we find meaning?
Yeah.
How have you always known that? Have you always found yourself an identity and purpose in faith and belief?
Definitely not. I was born and raised in a Christian home, but I was not always a Christian. I definitely did have that foundation. My mom was the first Christian in our home. She was the one who introduced even my dad and, my other siblings to, faith. But that was not enough, because even it's like, if you get a warm intro from someone to another person, if you don't do as much as you need to do to build your own direct connection with the person you were introduced to, you would only get surface level benefits, in quote, from that person. So it's the same thing, right? So I was born and raised in a Christian home, but I think it didn't really start for me until I was about 16 years old. And this was when I got into university, a very like pivotal part of my life. And I had lost my mom at this point. Even at that, the Christian thing was still to like have faith, not mourn like people who were hopeless, but I still had questions. And I think what really defined it for me was a simple tweet I saw from someone. Her name is Somto Udeke, and she just tweeted, "Who wants to hear from God?"
Oh, wow.
And I was very curious. I'm always very curious. I don't even know if she would remember that. And then I indicated interest, and then we were to meet at the chapel in Unilag. And so when we got there were a group of about 5 to 7 other young women that I could see myself in. And one thing that stood out was they were really beautiful, like extremely physically beautiful women. And I was like, God, if these fine girls can be this on fire, like for you, then I have no business, like I have no excuse, like personally, because I think that representation was very important for me. And then there was one of them who, up to date, is still my really good friend, Ekezie Zara, and she like was just so like on fire. And even till now, like I feel like she's more on fire than she was then, for God. And for me, that was just a defining moment when I decided for myself that I would take this thing more seriously, that there was something else to be done beyond being raised in a Christian home. And that was where I started.
It's really interesting. It's good to know Twitter is good for something. But she writing, "Who wants to hear from God?" and you indicating interest in that. Was there a part of you at the moment that was seeking and yearning for something? And it seemed like that was an approximation of an answer. Because I assume maybe at church, every week they call for people to give their life. And why wasn't that what drew you in? And the random tweets saying, "Who wants to hear from God?" Like that would not convert an unbeliever. So what was it about that time?
I think it was the humanization of God in the tweets. Who wants to hear from God means like at that point you knew that God, like you could almost like, oh, is there a voice? Is there a particular way the voice sounds? Just that curiosity. And naturally, I'm a very curious person. Even I notice it's something that annoys Nigerians. Like people who are just curious, like, oh, why is this like this? Or why is this not like that? So I ask a lot of questions about a lot of things. So I would say it's a combination of different things. But I would say it was just that humanization. And I was really like, I was practically a child then. And so there's a way these things are crafted to children that makes it sound even more interesting. And I would definitely say that just that humanization, like, okay, how can you just ask me like this instead of who wants to see the dynamic moving power of God shift the atmosphere and all those like...
Did you rehearse that? It sounds like that's something that's been said to you before.
No, it's just like very common Christianese. Like, and it's fine, it works, but it's just like when you're learning something in a field, you might not be familiar with the jargon that is used until you become an expert.
Yeah.
There's language you would use for professionals, beginners, or like intermediate, people. So I think that was very beginner level for me, and it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So there's this sort of kernel of your identity which was found in God. You started going on that journey around when you were 16, and 6 something years later, it sort of spiraled into other parts of your personality and other things that you do. Do you mind just weaving that narrative? Like what, have you gone on to do since then? What's that journey look like for you?
Yeah. I think for me, since knowing God, I think the biggest thing knowing God has done for me is help me see how limitless I am myself. And it's very important for me because we live in a world where there is always someone somewhere unknowingly trying to put people in a box, or put someone in a box. And I would say that's the biggest thing. In my journey of like knowing God, I've discovered that I know how to write. I've discovered that I know how to dance, or I enjoy dancing relatively well.
Yeah, we see the videos.
Yeah, like in my journey, I've also discovered that I love fashion. I went on to build like a career for over a period of time out of that, because not everyone is able to say they love something and then build like something that actually feeds them out of that like interest. But God helped me like figure that part out. In the process, I've also built really great friendships and really great, like connections with people, because when you start out your life in a certain way and you have to maybe transition, there is that need sometimes to change your circle that we don't really like talk about a lot or acknowledge, and not in a prideful way. It's just some things may just not work anymore. So knowing God has helped me cut and replace, add and subtract, people who have contributed in different ways to my life. Knowing God has helped me become now like currently a startup founder, because how that was even orchestrated is so divine. Like I don't feel like my wit alone would have like helped me do what I'm currently doing, even though that's also a part of it. So I think it's just all these many different things. We're currently in the process of discovering how to sing.
I mean, it sounds like we'll get there. The track record is there.
Yeah, which is something I really, really I'm now curious about, because I've always been curious about music. And I know that that's also like, if you read, like, I'm sure there are parts in the Bible that justify like how much like God is like just musically inclined. So I know that that's also like a gift he is now trying to reveal. And knowing God has helped me become more confident, just generally be able to look at things or people in the face and tell them who I am, or just ask for things, or submit myself to providing value of some sort. So it's just a whole lot of things that knowing God has helped me and is helping me find.
Yeah. So let's talk about transitioning for a bit. You were a professional model for a few years, did really well at that. And at some point you knew it was time to transition.
Yeah.
How did you know when it was time? How did you call it? And the reason why I ask is a lot of people know that the cloud has moved from the seasons of the life that they are in, they are in, but knowing what to do, and even if they know what to do, that process of transitioning it's impossible for most people. How did you know it was time?
Yeah. So I knew that, or I started to know that it was time to transition from modeling when I started to feel a huge sense of dissatisfaction with myself. But not in a way that made me want to compare to other people, but in a way that just made me want more for myself. I think exposure also did like it played a huge role there, because the more you start to interact with the world, you start to see, maybe am I a local champion? Like, why am I so comfortable with where I am and like what I'm currently doing? You start to see possibilities. So I started to feel very dissatisfied. I would classify that process into two, because there was, first of all, the very innate part of the journey. Then there was the environmental part of it. So to begin with the innate part of that journey, it was just me. It was just a gut feeling. Like there was no other explanation. I just knew that I could be more. I felt like I had done all and worked with all the brands that I personally wanted to work with. And in reality, that's not true, because I don't think I never got to work with like Gucci.
Yeah.
But I was just like this feeling of being on the runway every year at a very predictable season, because fashion has seasons, like, and you just know when it's fashion week and all of them just happen at the same time.
Back, yeah.
I was just like, this thing is getting boring. And that was the first feeling. And then the more environmental one was, there's no money there.
Yeah.
Like, at least in Nigeria,
I mean, globally.
I don't know how many people or how many models, like, and I might be ignorant about this, but I don't know how many models really like make so much money that makes them as influential as they need to be in the world, or as impactful as they need to be in the world. Like, you see a lot of people who now like start to do businesses, maybe build their own makeup brand or their own clothing brand. And there's a reason for that. It's because I personally believe that was just a platform for, it was an avenue for me to build an audience. Like, because if you have people who can listen to anything you have to say, then you can potentially sell anything you want to people. Yeah. Right? So there was the environmental part of it. And I just started to ask myself, Ifeoma, with how rich you want to be, do you really think this is the path that would ultimately lead you there? And the word ultimately is important, because it played a huge role, right? And when the answer for that was no, to be very honest, I was confused. I didn't know what the next thing to do would be.
Because I was going to ask that. How did you know what the next thing was? Because there is, I mean, one would think the typical path, okay, you've been a professional model, maybe go be a movie star. Yeah. Or like, just do something in the media and fashion space where you're out there. Yeah. But you made a lateral move. Yeah. Started to learn how to code. Yeah. How did that decisioning process happen?
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't know. And this is when the lockdown was this is why it was very instrumental for me. Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of empathy, like around that period, people's healths were affected and all of that. But personally, I was very grateful, because I felt like the whole world could now stop. Yeah. Like, whether you were 50, 80, 12, we are all
now. It was the ultimate leveler. We're the same.
We're all here now, and we all have to sit and think of what is very important, or what is most important. And so I think it was that year for me, because that was also when my sister and I remember we moved out like one day before the lockdown. Immediately they announced lockdown. Let's say it was on Thursday, for example. We started house hunting like the previous week or a few days before, and then we went to Apapa Market.
I don't even know where that is.
Yeah, like to hectic. Buy furniture, because there was no time for order online. Yeah, get it delivered. We went there. We got bed frame, everything. Because we had gotten like this 3-bedroom apartment, but there was only one room in that 3-bedroom that was for us. So what
were the other 2 rooms?
There were other people living there. So they were like, it was a shared apartment.
Oh, I see.
Exactly. But we only got like one room, because that was how important it was for us to live where we were to experience that lockdown year. And so we did that. And if you know the stress of house hunting in Lagos, you know that was a miracle.
Yeah, it was magic.
Like, even as not convenient as the setup was, to still find that place when we did and how we did, it was a miracle. So we did that, and we moved, and that was, we spent the entire lockdown year together. That's my sister and I, Onika. And I would say, like, what that did for me is it created an avenue to really think and to really just be in a serene environment, and try my hands in as many different things. In the process as well, I did meet some very cool guys. And I would say they are partly responsible for the expansion that I experienced, like mentally that year. They were developers. Yeah. They are developers. And they were earning in dollars, guy. Like
living the dream.
Yeah, like I remember going out or hanging out with one of them. By the way, one of them was a love interest.
That's always the best way to get you to change.
And that was how I met the other people, because they were all friends. And I was just curious. Again, that curiosity, like, how are they making this money? Like, what are they doing? Why are they so cool? How can we just go out and they just have 300K to spend at the supermarket buying groceries? Because because it was lockdown, and so a lot of people were stocking up and all of that. My question was just how. And so I started to ask questions, just see style, don't be too desperate or don't look too like hungry. But I started to just get to know a bit more. Some of them had jobs in Germany, USA, all of that. And so I discovered, that was where I discovered software development. Yeah. That was when I knew what Ifes meant. And then I remember then when I was a model, there was one of my close friends who had tried to tell me about software development, but then it didn't make sense to me. Like, since we're trying to be
two
models,
different worlds. Yes,
like we're trying to be models. Which one is come and learn how to build websites? And it goes back to the same theme of relatability. When people are able to break down concepts to you and meet you where you are, and not make things look so grand, complex, and hard. Yeah, so I think that was where that was where the interest came in. And I spent months just like putting my head down, trying to learn this thing. At some point, I knew it wasn't for me because it wasn't working. I just felt like my brain was too, like it wasn't working. And so I now tried my hands in UI UX design. I had been seeing that a lot on Twitter, but I didn't know what that meant. I thought UI meant University of Ibadan. So I thought they were just like representing their alma mater. Until
you don't know how funny that is.
It was until I paid attention, or I started to become curious about what UI UX meant. I now checked it, and then I tried that as well. It would have worked out if I continued, because I have a natural inclination towards design. But God had other plans. I'll put it that way. And I think what he did with that period is he just wanted me to understand certain concepts.
And a few of them shine through. It starts with, look, you were a model. You felt like you had done everything you were interested in doing. And you started to become uncomfortable with predictability. And you wanted to venture out into this unknown and figure out what's there. Because you had an understanding of who you ultimately wanted to be. But what you did not know was how to get from where you were, or where as a model, to that place where you're wealthy, where you're influential. And I wonder how, because that is, I think if we were to pinpoint something that is the bane for what a lot of young people feel, I'm uncomfortable. I'm going through this crisis where, I feel like I'm not the person I'm supposed to be. I know I kind of have a vague idea of who I want to be, but how do I even take that first step? Why do you think people don't take that first step? Why people don't venture into the unknown to figure out things the way you did? Why do you think that's not the case? Like, why isn't everyone doing that?
So I hear variations of this question and the answers a lot of times, and I humbly think that sometimes they are phrased with a lack of empathy. Because just even sharing my story now, I'm even realizing, look, like, if there were certain places I didn't get into by chance, if there were certain people that I met and did not create certain, and they just maybe didn't like me enough to even like give me audience, I probably wouldn't have figured this thing out. Because I remember times when I would like get my friend Tolu Duile, and I'm very comfortable calling names because I think it's so important to credit people that contributed in very little ways. I remember like times where I would rope him into calls to explain software concepts to me, and I looked so foolish. Like, imagine someone who is like an expert, like you're bringing them down to basically ABC of what they do, and they're not mocking you for being there. They're genuinely supportive of that. So I think that why a lot of people don't take the first step is because they genuinely don't have the help that they need, or they don't have access to the help that they need. Because it's one thing to know that this is how you can get help or where you can get help from. It's another thing to have access to it. Context, I was already a model. And what that meant was that I was already cool to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like there are so many people that would see me and be like, fine babe. Or like, I already had that conventionally like attractive outlook to a lot of people. So people...
And the world is nicer to attractive people.
Exactly. Like, so I would say like for the average person, what does that even look like? Someone with 200 followers, someone with, because those are metrics that matter in this time, someone who is not, conventionally attractive in the way society likes to define it. And I would say that's one thing, just not having that access to help, and access to information generally. And information in this case now is that sometimes we wait for people to package things that we can directly access. So there are some times when it's like, oh, I want to do this because I'm like, a Google search will save your life.
Yeah.
And we're not talking to people who are in remote areas who don't have access to internet. I'm talking to people who are on Instagram and can afford data, So maybe just that, maybe sometimes we've overcomplicated simple things that people now start to feel like they're so unreachable. Because remember, when I shared the story of how I became curious about God, it was because of how one person simplified that concept of hearing from God that made me know that it was possible that I, at 16 years old, could hear from God. Before then, we had seen hearing or speaking to God as an adult thing to do, where your parents pray on your behalf, right? So I think maybe people who have succeeded at some level maybe have not done the best job, just dumbing this thing down to, how would the average person in Ikorodu, Nigeria, Isolo, Yaba, how would the average person see this information and not feel like it is out of their reach? I think that we owe it to people to make ourselves as relatable as possible so that people know that they can come and ask questions. They can know that this opportunity you've gotten, they can get it too. And this is just the simple thing to do. But there's also the other side of things where people are just not confident, in their abilities. And we live in a world where we over-exaggerate people's perception about
What
us.
do you mean?
You think that if you tried something and failed, people are sitting in their house laughing at you.
Yeah, it's like everyone is so busy worrying about themselves that no one is paying as much attention. I think it's also the opposite effect of we feeling like we're all on a stage. You have followers on Instagram, so you automatically think everyone is watching you.
Exactly.
But no, people are just as miserable as you are, worrying about themselves.
There's something that Pastor Aaron says a lot, and he says that if it would be, and I'm paraphrasing, it would be foolish to think that nobody is looking at you, or nobody's watching you, but it will also be proud to think that everybody has their eyes on you. So I think there's that balance. Like, that, okay, fine. If you started something or you took a step and it turned out to not be the best decision, you could easily make a cool story out of that. And I think I'm I think in my own right, I'm the poster girl of just, you knew I was doing this before. Oh, now I'm doing this. And this is and that's why this period of my life feels very, no matter how much I haven't gotten as much as I want to get, I'm very proud of myself to be able to uphold a business in one of the hardest industries ever for 3-4 years counting now.
Yeah.
Because I've done things. To some people, I did fail as a model.
Yeah.
To some people, I did not make that choice.
Yeah.
That conscious effort to transition.
Yeah.
That's their story, right?
That's fine.
I did not get placements to South Africa. I never traveled to Italy and Paris to model. So to some people, I was just a local champion.
Yeah.
But there are ways to own that narrative. So I feel back to the question, sometimes people don't take the first step because of an overconsciousness. And that thing you feel, it's real. There are people watching, but I don't think that people are that invested in your life, or as invested in your life as you're giving them the power to feel. So we're too conscious, and some other times it's a lack of sense of purpose, which is where and why I would never downplay the role that God has played in my life. Because I now know that more than anything else, my disobedience to God's instructions on what I should do or not do is not just affecting me. There are lives at stake if I don't do what I'm supposed to do. There are things, assignments that, He would raise other men to do if I don't do. But imagine if, we all just said yes to God. I think seeing it from that point of view, taking steps as a sense of, as a type of service to humanity would really help with putting that pressure off, from yourself, and just saying, hey, I'm doing this because I know that there are young women, for example, or young boys or young girls who need this thing that I'm doing, or who need to hear my story, or who need to see me doing what I'm doing. And again, it's just creating that balance of not now being performative and forgetting to do the actual work because you want to be impactful. So I think it's a combination of different things. But just to summarize, sometimes people genuinely don't have access to help. Sometimes simple concepts are overcomplicated by people who have gone ahead. In some industries, it's called gatekeeping. And other times it's just a lack of confidence and a lack of that sense of purpose, where you feel like everything that happens in your life is for you and for you only. But it's not that true. So
that makes sense. And what would you say is your priority in your life right now? Like you said, you've mastered the art of transitioning, which people underestimate, but I think is one of the most powerful skills to build when you're young. I think it's a great way to preserve your youth even in your old age, because you're not afraid to peel back the layers of that no longer work for you, and assume a new identity, and that sort of keeps you young. It keeps you fresh. You're not afraid to let go of certain reputation you've built in this particular industry, and I'm so wedded and tied to it, and if that comes crumbling down, it takes a part of me with it. Well, what's your current priority in life right now?
Simply put, my current priority, which I think is more long-term, is stability.
What does that look like?
On all ends.
What does stability mean?
Stabil.
Your intrusive thoughts are not letting you.
Stability for me, it looks like financial stability. And so you start to ask how. And that's where things like what problems exist in the world? How can I build businesses out of those problems? How can I create opportunities for investments that would yield, good returns? So that's one part of it. And then that's just context. There's so many businesses I want to I just want to, for example, I want to own a chain of grocery stores. I just want to own it.
Is it so you'll be getting plantain chips for free?
Maybe. Right? I want to also own restaurants, because I'm very curious about hospitality. I'm still curious about fashion. There are still parts of the fashion industry that maybe not as a subject, but as the person creating
the platforms
or avenues for people to thrive or businesses to thrive. I'm still curious about that. I'm still very interested in supply chain and logistics now. That's something that is just, it boggles my mind a lot. Why is it so hard? And obviously, being in this line of business is making me sad. There's a lot of things that are beyond maybe private, control. And maybe seeing how sometimes it's just a thing of how the environment is, and if we had better policies, doing certain types of businesses would be easier. I don't know the first thing about cars, but I want to own an automobile business. Like, I don't know, like, I want to become a music producer. The things that I just want to do, right? So, and I know that I can do all these things for fun. But again, this world, if you want impact, you need money to an extent. And so financial stability, and then I would say stability also in my spiritual life, because it's very easy to get distracted by all of these ambitions and, just maybe put God in a corner. So for me, I'm very big on creating long-lasting structures that will fuel my fire for the rest of my life. Because I see people like Pastor Emmanuel Aaron and how they've been on fire, or he has been on fire since he was like
15 years.
Exactly. And even now you can see that there's an increment, or there's an incremental effect in that part of his life. And people like Ekezie Zara, like I had mentioned before as well. So for me, I'm very curious to know, like, what have they done? Like, what structures have they put in place, and are they putting in place to create this level of stability for themselves spiritually? And also personal stability, just in my relationships, in my friendships. I feel like it gets to a point where you have to know who your day ones are. And you have to be able to sustain long-term relationships, right? So I'm doing my best to be as intentional as I can to carry all my people along. And there are not many of them, but making sure that I'm not changing my friends every 2 business days just because there's some cool stuff I think is happening for me. So just how do you carry people along? How do you navigate transitions and seasonal changes with other people? Because it's so different. Like when we had spoken about modeling and transitioning from modeling, I had to, what needed to happen was like a complete override. Like my entire circle changed. But now, I'm like, good people are...
and you see them, hold on to them.
Yeah, like I'm holding on to them with my dear life. And so for me, it's just, how do I create stability across these different parts of my life? And how do I have fun while doing that? That's very important.
One thing that I told you a few weeks ago when we were at my house was I really admire how well you sustain friendships. Again, I don't know to what extent the depth, but even for someone who is as well connected as I am, your contact list, your Rolodex is one I tap into very often. How do you do it? It seems very easy. You're very charming. Even a lot of people who know me, oh, you're Ifeoma's friend. You're not Kennedy, but you're Ifeoma's friend, which is kind of cool. But what tips and tricks do you have for me and for everyone who wants to?
So I know people hear this a lot, and it's like, what do you mean? But the hack is to be yourself, because people can perceive unoriginality, and they hate it more than you think or know that they do.
Why?
People instantly know when you're trying to be someone else, and they've already seen that person. And people like myself, I get bored easily too. So once I've seen something and you're showing me something similar again, like there's that constant need for a feeling of excitement that we have as human beings. So you have to make sure that you're not trying to replicate exactly like what people have already seen in some way.
Do you think people hate it because it almost feels like you're insinuating to them that they're stupid and they can't figure out when you're trying to be a scam in that sense and be someone else?
I think it's just an attention span thing. Like if I could listen to, for example, LeBron James, why do I need to listen to the fake one?
LeBron James is a basketballer, right? So.
If I could listen, if I could watch him play or something, or if I could listen to him give his speech about something. And I don't even know why he's. I think it's because I'm wearing sneakers.
I love it,
But it's the same thing with clothes. When someone is wearing the fake and you're like, why didn't you just get the unbranded version of this cool sneaker? You didn't need to show me his Gachi or Chizaram. If you cannot afford Zara, it's fine. Why are you wearing this? And so it's that same thing.
Chizaram is funny.
It's that same principle, right? With people. So I think really just being yourself, it helps you discover a lot of parts that you won't even know that people like. And that's why you see things like for creators on Instagram, you will put so much thought and effort into like creating a video, but then it's the one where you showed when you were frying plantain that people love.
Yeah, it happens that I'm like, you people are not that smart. Like, people are so shallow. Like,
people just like originality, and I think that's the general feedback that I implement. People love originality. Sometimes to an extent that causes over familiarity. So you have to know when to change it and just be like, hey, like, please, we're not friends. But I think that has worked a lot for me. I could care less about someone wanting to perceive me as a startup founder. And that's what you want my Instagram page to be about. Just download the app. Like, download the app and you see the work, or like, come and be a customer. And I'll feel like then
that part of your personality will engage
I have
with
an
them.
obligation to attend to you as the person behind or one of the people behind these things. But if you come to like a very personal space or a social, like, don't expect the startup founder to be folding arms every day on Instagram. Like, I just won't do that. Like, and then something else that, that works for me is, or that has worked for me is just really seeing people and the potential before they become so shiny and attractive. So I'll give an example. This show this is a show, right? Like, this is the first one. And I'm just always like, I'm happy to like be there when people are test running and doing like V1 of whatever they're working on. Because this is going to like evolve into a thing where like presidents are like sitting and chatting with you. But like, this is going to go in the archives. Like the presidents and all those people will want to come when, they've checked the numbers. And when I'm like, Kennedy's doing something, I'll be there. Like, this person is doing something. Yeah, it's not up to the standard we like to see on Instagram now, but I'll be there. Like, your mic is not working. Fine, it's fine. Like, you take feedback for the next edition, and that
our mic is working, by the way. So,
no, obviously. Yeah. But like, I think I'm that kind of person. I have unconsciously or subconsciously taken pride in being people's like day one. Like, I think that's a good trait, and not in an ostentatious way. Yeah. Right. Just in a very genuine way. Because you can't be day one for everybody. There are some people now trying to reach me that more. It looks like I've gone so far that
day 1,000.
They're very afraid.
The queue is long.
Yes. So I'll say that as well. Because I remember when I had actually heard of you first, and we're not even friends. That was when you were working on Africave. Yeah. And I was like, how do I join the fellowship, all of that? And I just followed you. You didn't respond to me like after some time.
Oops, wasn't personal.
But like, I just like kept following up, and then I kept following you and just I was comfortable there. Like, yeah. And then when you now evolved into your Burna Boy fanboy era, and I was so upset, like, why does he like Burna Boy so much? Like, this is why, like, what's this love for Burna Boy for? And then I'll try and like have those maybe like arguments, but then you will not even respond. And I think it was up until when you had your event last year in January, the goal setting one. And I think that was where like, and even at that, I was not like, Kennedy, let me sit in front. I was like at the back. I was like, this guy is cool.
It was very funny because I remember that day when we had an exercise, we were talking about, what's our purpose? And you're just like, mine is just Jesus. If Jesus says I should give away all my money, I mean, like, it was funny, but I was like, I really remember that moment.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's something I've tried to practice. Just not being too, I want to be friends with the cool kids. Like, I'll be a cool kid myself. And I know that there's a magnetic force or attraction that people have, like, when
look
they
at
see
us.
you. Exactly, like when they see you doing what you're doing. And then there are also times when I have directly like, hey, I want to be your friend. Yeah. Don't do that to me, by the way.
There's a bad way to do it. Yeah. And there's a good way to do it. Yeah. So most people do it badly.
Exactly. Like, I remember two of my like friends, Kelvin and Gogo, like, I DM'd them like, I want to be your friend. I remember complimenting Kelvin, you're so handsome. And I was not shooting shots, by the way. Like, I was just like, okay, what would someone like to hear? And then Gogo, I was like, we sat close to each other at this event. We didn't even talk much at the event, but then I went home and I DM'd her that I want to be your friend.
Yeah.
And it was very awkward at first, but then we found a way around it. And I think that has worked for me, but the fact that that has worked less times shows that it's probably not the most effective way.
Yeah.
Only very few people can like pull that off. But even at that, people's response to you then would be based on their current perception of who you are at the time as well. So I think just to summarize, it is being a visionary, like believing in people and their ideas before it becomes this very grand thing, and being okay if it doesn't evolve into something grand.
And it's not an investment, it's a friendship,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. And not doing that cloud chasing business that
because people can spot it, especially people who are in a position, because they probably get that a lot.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't be so different from the next person
exactly
who is trying to be friends with them because it makes you look cool.
Yeah.
And
just a very genuine level of originality. Like people just like you when you're you. I did some like mini survey on my Insta stories when I'm just trying to like find out about creators that people like and respond to. And it's just the people that are themselves, not the people that are doing. I mean, if suit and tie is who you are, that's great. But to what extent can suit and tie really be like
who you are? Yeah.
Like you have other things that you're interested in, and people genuinely want to see that, because what that does is it shows them possibilities as well. It shows them that at the end of the day, you're just like them. And I think that's a message that I intrinsically try to communicate, that I'm not that special. Like at the end of the day, I am, but like I'm not special enough to that you should feel bad if you try to be my friend and it doesn't work. Like you can have your own friends and be special too without me being there.
Earlier on we talked about stability, and I'm curious for you, for young people, your perception on this. How important do you think it is for young people to have emotional partnerships or relationships? How important is that for stability? Seriously, it's a serious conversation we also had the other night where we're talking about, for especially people who have a unique purpose, have figured that out. How important is it for them to be emotionally partnered up?
How important is it? I think it's as important as the direction in which your life is going. So, for example, if you are going in the direction where you can see that you're probably being put out in the spotlight a lot, and that's going to bring back a lot of attention from opposite sex, you probably want to create structure for discipline. And having this kind of partnership is one of the ways to build that. So let's say you're a musician, and when you start to go on tour and, like you start to really travel the world, there'll be so many people, there'll be so many opportunities. You have to know your values before you get there. And I think this is something I believe in, right? I believe that there is a level of fame that we shouldn't be given to just anybody. Like, we shouldn't just say because someone fried plantain chips on Instagram and did it 1,000 times, and she did this 1,000 times, so plantain chips, she's popular. Next thing, brand deals, endorsements. Because what those people behind the scenes don't tell you is that those things come with a lot of sacrifice. Especially when you are the subject, like when you are the star. There's so many things that you would be required to either give up or start to do. And you have to know before then if, that's who you are. So I think these days, just because of how social media, TikTok is set up, we make people famous too easily. But that's just me though. I like to say that if every consumer in the world was like me, people
will have very few stars.
People die. I say you'll be posting 1 million times. No like, no. I'll just be like.
But I mean, it points to what we said earlier, where people just like, it's like the questionable things. But I mean, it's what they like. So
but don't give too much power to it, or just because you're also investing part of yourself in that. Like, so if you see someone who is you know, who does an ad, for example, on Instagram, your comment, your like, your engagement is enriching that person. And to an extent, you may not know the full details. You want to be sure that the value of that person you are making rich aligns with what you believe in. I'm so conscious of this. And it's impossible to have full control over it, because some things and apps and people have just become very indispensable to an extent. So it's not possible to say, oh, I'm not using this because the manufacturer said this about Jesus Christ and I don't believe it. But there is that consciousness that I personally have, and it helps me, be disciplined. So going back to the question, I do think that it depends on your purpose. And I'm being very careful with this because I don't want to sound insensitive about those people who have tried and haven't found yet.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you have the opportunity as a young person to create structures for discipline, and I'm saying this like very intentionally, I'm using the word discipline because that's something that we like, that has become a thing. Like, how do you stay disciplined instead of motivated? And I want people to know that your romantic relationship, your choice to enter into a romantic commitment is a form of discipline, because what you're basically saying is you are committing to one person, you are committing to growing and doing life with them. You're committing to creating boundaries from many other people that could potentially have access to you. So it is a type of discipline. And I would recommend it for as many people as, as possible. I do think that there's also a need to start to question, how we look out for traits, like in partners. So as a young woman, I know that, I know that what you're looking for is like a guy who has a car and this and that, but is that really what you need? Or do you need someone who is humble enough to grow with you, even though he might be older though? Yeah. So it's just like questions that need to be asked, because some people will say, okay, now I want to be disciplined. Let me go and look for, okay, Ifeoma said I should be disciplined. And then you just go and look for anybody and then you say it's me, it's not me, but but yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking from it. I've not had I'm not the most experienced.
We won't go into that.
Yeah, I'm not the most experienced, but from the testimonies of other people I've seen, from the role models I have seen, I've seen, my pastors, for example, Pastor Iren and Pastor Emmanuel Iren and Pastor Laju Iren, they got married at a really young age. And, just imagine building all they built now together. Two heads will always definitely be better than
two
one.
Good heads.
Two good heads.
Reasonable, aligned heads.
Exactly. So that you're not going to find good heads.
Coconut head and,
but yeah, I would say it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Explore it if you have the opportunity. It helps you with creating some sort of discipline at every stage of your life, to be honest, but even more as young people. And so it's like that thing where we spoke about someone not being able to take the first step. So imagine you had a partner who it was their responsibility to push you.
Yeah.
These are just some benefits, but I wish everyone all the best.
Thank you. I mean, we will all need it. So I guess my final question for you is, who do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
Who does Ifeoma want to be when she grows up?
Ifeoma wants to be the grown-up version of Ifeoma. Yeah, I want to be the grown-up version of myself. I really like who I am. I really like myself a lot, so much.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that whatever I'm doing now that is working, I pray and hope for the grace to sustain, and not be like a one-hit wonder, or be like, those people that they were so cool in high school and then they peaked in high school. Yeah, exactly. I empathize with them anyway. It's not easy, but I want to be the grown-up version of myself in all areas. Like I'd mentioned before, financially, I want to make sure that as long as I'm doing things in my control, I have enough to get by, each day, and also extend that help to other people. Because there's only so much money can do for me. You have car, house, clothes, shoe. At some point, it becomes repetitive. So I want to be able to do for others. Spiritually, I want to make sure that like there is nothing and like no level of success that would make me lose my sense of self in Christ. It's so important because we see things like that happen. And it takes grace. It's not really by praying every day, and because you can be praying and becoming even more like wicked.
Oh yeah.
You know, so I just really want to make sure that, you know, that part of my life is sustained for the rest of my life, incrementally. And that would be possible if and when I have people around me that remind me of who I am, which goes back to, you know, friends and having the right people. So I just want to be the grown-up version of myself. Whoever I am today, I want to be the more established, more like controlled, hotter version of
more
myself.
Controlled. That's very interesting.
I like hotter, like
I know. Yeah, we had that part.
No, I want no. No, like I want to say like hotter, like because
yeah, you're already on the way there. So
because that's so important for me. But I just want to be myself. I don't know that there's anything else in this world.
So yeah. Ifeoma, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you.